Winston, where were you? So what I want to know is when Altina Farm was attacked, Rex Nongu was involved in that group, the farm attack, which really was the trigger for Op Hurricane. Where were
Yeah,
you and what
I
was,
was at Bandura.
okay, so it didn't come as a surprise to you when it happened?
No, not at all. And we went to quite a few attacks later, stores in that area. And where farmers were attacked, and so it wasn't a surprise at all. But things did, now it was hotting up, and the powers to be realized that there was a serious, sort of threat, and they were infiltrating, and there were things happening. And that's when I had a long chat to Ron.
Yes.
And he said, "Look, leave it with you. I'm going to speak to the general." And I didn't think anything would come of it. And eventually, I think I mentioned in that last time I spoke to you, Jerry Strong and Ron came to my office and knocked on the door. I was in Salisbury at the time. And he said, "Hi, Junior, tea, please, and coffee from Jerry." I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "We come to see you. You're coming to join us." I said, "What am I joining?" Yeah. Red Cross or bloody, We had a good laugh. And he said, "No, he's convinced the general that we should go with the pseudo gang because, we needed more structure to it." And he was absolutely right. And I was trying to do it,
piecemeal,
on the sort of shoestring.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and he told me then, he said, "Look, we're going to form this. It's been given the go-ahead. You come in and we'll take Stanton if he wants to come." Stanton actually left the police at that stage. Something happened and he said, "Oh, stuff you, I'm going." And he went to go and work for a bloody olivine factory or something, coffee. I don't know what they were doing. Anyway, so I said, "Look, I know and we need this guy. He's he knows all the tricks, and not only that, he keeps a big trunk with all the bloody files in it, and he drags around all over the place." And so I went to go and see him, and I said, "Well, before that," he said, "Junior, you're coming with me. You've got nothing to say about it." I was pleased. And I said, "Well, Jerry, what do I do now?" He said, "Well, we're looking for a place to stay. Do you know of any place, hidden away in Bandura?" So I said, "Well, I'll find out." When we found that place, I think I might have mentioned earlier, at the mine, and then adjacent to the mine, there was an old farmhouse which we could use, and the railway track between the two, the factory and the mine, and this place. So that's where we started, and it happened all of a sudden. Vehicles came in, they built a bloody shed, they put an ops room up, and just quick, and that's where we lived. And then we started recruiting. He started recruiting people that could speak the lingo and people that we knew would help. And he brought a lot of RLR guys in. And it all started to happen in earnest then. And one of our favorite blokes was old, speak to me every bloody week, was Dale Collett. And Dale Collett, I said, "Look, I've heard there's a guy called Dale Collett, and I've seen him. And he speaks, the lingo." So we got a hold of him, and he joined us. And he was an officer. So, we had a good sort of group going. And I stayed with Ron in his little cottage. And he moaned and groaned at me snoring or something. We had a good rapport, and things started to happen then because he knew exactly what he wanted, and we started to have success. But it was funny how it all evolved, and we got into a lot of trouble because we did things that we shouldn't have done, and they never let me go across the border. The police said, no, police is not going across the border. But eventually, uh, Ron took me to see the general, and he said, look, this is what Winston's got. This is the information. We need him with us on this next trip. And so that gave me the in to go across with the guy, which I did, on various occasions after that.
Winston,
and we had lots of success.
So now you start deploying with these pseudo groups in the country and outside the country, really in an intelligence gathering operation. You're not looking for a fight. You're out there just gathering information, trying to piece the puzzle together.
Yeah. Well, once we really found where they were staying, we did go in for the fight, and we attacked these places.
Okay, so Winston, talk us through the whole evolutionary sort of process leading to the Fire Force concept and how the Selous Scouts hook up with the RLI and how that all then unfolds.
Yeah. Well, every day we would have a group sort of meeting and discuss. This is with Ron and the guys like Jerry Strong and that, and we discuss how far we've got, where we thought they were, where we were sure they were, and at that stage too, we were sending guys in. Shully was one of them. This, halo jump he did with the black guy into areas we designated, and he would sit up on the gommel and look and find the camps. Once he established, you are on the right track. And as soon as information came in, then a trip was sort of organized. It took a bit because the vehicles were armored vehicles. We had to take a mechanic with us. We had to, this is what, nothing to do with me, but this is what Ron had sort of established. He was very meticulous about having everything done properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we then started to get success, and we lost a few guys then, very, very, wonderful people. And of course, Dale Collins was injured, and in fact, I was talking to him just the other day. I speak to him once, every week, and he was telling me that he'd had a message from a guy called, we called him, God, when I was speaking to him, I can't remember the bloody names. He was a big mechanic with a bloody big hand. And when he shook hands, you were reluctant to shake his hand because he squeezed it so hard, he just about crushed your bloody hand. And Vice Crip, they called him Vice Crip. He said, I've just had a call from Vice Crip. And I knew what the story was. And he revealed, he told me again, he said, once, this is like 3 or 4 weeks ago, he said, I said, I spoke to Vice Crip and I was crying. I said, what? He said, because Vice Crip told him, he said, Dale, I'm glad you're still alive and doing well. He said, remember, when I found you injured. And what had happened was Dale went up the staircase in this building. And at the top of the stairs, there was a landing. Did I tell you this before?
No.
There was a landing. As he got to the landing, I think he was with Tim Bax.
Mm-hmm.
A turret hidden in the cupboard fired through the cupboard door and hit Dale, and gave Tim Bax a blast. And Tim Bax went down the corridor and into a room. This is at the second floor. Of course, Dale got it in the back, and he fell down the staircase. And Vice Grip, he couldn't move. He was still alive, of course. Came in and carried him out. He was so strong. He lifted and ran with him out to the truck. And Dale said, if it hadn't been for him, he wouldn't have lived.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just that feeling, and that's why I'm so, I just have this wonderful feeling about Dale and a few guys, this whole thing is the people I've met and lived with and served with. And that to me, it was what it was all, and I get so angry when like a guy came into a place we've got here. It's like a little museum. Some citizen force guy started it down the road from us, and it's very well done. You've got flags, and it's all about Zimbabwe and whatever. And he was a TF guy, and he's done very well. He's got his little business, but he keeps this little museum going. He's got a lot of stuff there, and a black guy went in there. This was a few weeks ago now, and said, you this is terrible. You're displaying all this stuff, and it's Nazi this and Nazi that, and you did this to the black people, and it wasn't called for. That he was too young to have been there even, but now he's and so that really grips me, and of course when Dale told me about Vice Grip, it gives you a bit of hope that at least there are sensible people that understand. We didn't go there trying to bloody massacre everybody.
No, that's right. Winston, talk a bit about the Nzonya operation, how it unfolded, and your involvement in that attack.
I'm trying to work out now which one that was.
That was the mobile where the column drove into the camp, and I think the initial information came from an aerial photograph, a camera flying over, picked up a concentration of people, and then intelligence was gathered, and then I know you came into the picture in quite a big way with Ron Reed Daly, and you went to see General Walls, who gave the okay. That's what I remember from my chats with Ron.
That's right. That was we got information that was getting bigger and bigger, and there was a lot of terrorists in that camp. And often I'd go with Ron to see General Walls, and we'd explain what was happening and what we wanted to do, and he would normally give us the go-ahead. That, in fact, caused a lot of trouble in the military because we'd gone straight to the general. And we'd gone straight to the general because we knew that we were going to be sidelined if we went anywhere else. And of course, I remember that. I didn't go on that trip, but I remember when it happened. And I know that a lot of guys were taken out there. They drove in and they were on. That's right. They were in formation and at standing, on the parade, as it were, when they mowed them down.
Winston, I want to go back again now. 1974, détente. At that point, am I right in saying the security forces were very much on top of the situation? The link between Selous Scouts and the RLI was working extremely well, and the enemy were on the back foot when détente was called for and forced to put pressure on the Rhodesian government. Do you just remember that period?
I remember it, yes. And I remember what happened at one stage. We knew that there was a group across the river, and we could have gone over there and taken them out. But because of the détente, they held back. And I think there was I wasn't there, but I think it was another special branch guy that had gone down with some military guy to the bridge. And I think they thought they were going to have a conflab. I'm not sure about this. I just know that we held, the region held their gunfire. The other guys didn't. They basically, took them out because they didn't adhere to this détente thing. I might be wrong, but I vaguely sort of remember that sort of thing happening. I remember being aghast at the fact that we, taken the stop and they couldn't adhere to it anyway.
Winston, there was also a story, there was a notorious insurgent. I'm not sure if his name was James Bond or Mao or something, but I think he was the guy that was involved in killing the Connex guys, Bland, and there were two of them that were ambushed and killed. And you went after this particular individual. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah. They were they people from internal affairs that they killed, or was it?
Could have been internal affairs. I know one of them was Charlie Bland's dad. I can't remember the other guy. They were ambushed. And this bloke who was responsible for that ambush was also very busy in the area, terrorizing the local populace. And I think you eventually caught up with him.
I think I remember that. Did they bury the vehicle?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, they killed the conservation guys, and they buried the vehicle and the corpses. I'm not sure if it was that one.
Do you remember the hunt for this particular individual? Because I think you were actually responsible for his eventual arrest.
Yeah. No, there was that sort of thing that did happen. And I remember we did arrest him, and it was a setup then. We discussed what we should do with him, because he admitted to doing what he did, and he said he'd been forced to do it by the guys that he was with. He wasn't the senior bloke. Mm-hmm. And but we'd caught him, and under certain circumstances we had an arrangement that we would never hurt a terrorist. We would never hit or slap or maim a terrorist. Mm-hmm. We would speak to them and see if they could work for us. And I'm not sure if this was one of them, because when I spoke to the guy, he didn't mention this. He didn't mention that. We just knew that he'd been involved in this sort of thing. We thought he was. He'd been arrested. And Peter Stanton arrived at my doorstep and said, "Winston, we've got a guy here. You've got a guy here." And he told me what had happened. He said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, hell," because I was hoping that we put him in our group. He seems to know a lot. He said, all I can say, we know for a fact that he was part of this group that had murdered these conservation people, buried the vehicle." So I said, "All right, well, let's go and see Ron." So we, in one of our forts, and we said, "Look, we've got a problem. This guy is a bad bastard, and this is what he's done." And Ron said, "Well," he said, "if that's the case, then he's got to go, to court, got to go gallows or whatever." Because, as I said to you before, we would never torture, we would never force anybody, because we knew they tell you things which you're not right. So if we're going to use anybody, we need to have them, And we went back to him and said, "Listen, you haven't told us the whole truth." And this big man, he was a big guy, burst into tears. And he admitted to everything. He said, "Look, I thought it was a couple of African constables, and they killed them and dug a hole and buried them with his body. I think that's what I thought it was. I don't know if a vehicle was involved." And so I said, "Well, he's admitted it." Pete said, "Well, he has to go to court." we went back to Ron. Ron said, yeah, he's got to go to court. But what did I think? And at that stage, I thought, well, because of the way he acted and the way he'd said, look, it wasn't me, but I was there, and he didn't try and sort of cover it up, basically. I said, he'd be bloody good if we do have it, because he knows where all these other guys are. So we went back to Ron, and Ron said to us, he said, Winston, it's your call. If you think he's going to be helpful, but I'm that maybe the best thing is to take him off to prison. Anyway, we didn't let him stay. And we had him, we mentioned or any, and you got, we'll do it ourselves. And this guy was unbelievably good. And he took us to lots of groups, which we were able to take out. But I'm not sure what happened to him in the end, because things got so muddled up at the end. Mm-hmm. We were going across the border quite often, and we'd use him to go in, because he was well known. But I think he did actually get taken out in the end.
Winston, on a lighter note, the Selous Scouts put together one great team of rugby players, and you played one game. I've got a photograph of that team somewhere. Am I right? They only played one game, but
that's right.
What an incredible lineup of I don't know how many national players you had in that side, but just tell us.
That's right.
Just tell us about that.
Well, it was interesting because Ron said, we've got to play a game. We've got to have a Scouts team. So I said, God, we're not bloody fit enough, man. He said, no, I'm getting jerseys for all of you. So he got his bloody jersey, and I said, Ron, it's not me, because I haven't played for bloody ages. You had me running around the bush here. Now you're telling me I'm going to play rugby. He said, you're playing. And I remember speaking to my wife and saying, shit, I better get fit. And running up and down the lawn at home, thinking, it's tomorrow. Eventually we went. And I got cramp in both bloody legs, one after the other. I never scored a try, but we did win. I think we won with 1 point or something. It was, I don't know how we did it, but we did. And it was the only game we played, thank God. I didn't want to play again. I think that was my last game I ever played.
It was a hell of a team, though. You had, I don't know how many Rhodesian players. Colin Blythe.
We did.
Billy Lemon. Jeez, there were some good rugby players in that team.
Yeah. My son is just telling me we've got to photograph it. I know.
We must put that up. But Winston, nobody probably knew him better than you did, and he got a lot of bad press, which I don't think he deserved, old Ron, to do with Ivory and stuff. But just your recollections of him, the man, and just how you got on with him.
Ron.
Mm.
You're talking about Ron now.
Yeah.
Well, I loved the man. I really did. And I suppose he knew me through rugby. I played for Police, and I played for Rhodesia under 19 or something at one stage. And he told me, look, they wanted a rugby team and that sort of thing. And we discussed many things, Ron and I. And he wasn't a father figure because he wasn't that old, but we just got on so well. And there were times when I thought, Ron, perhaps you shouldn't go that far. But he just knew he was for the men, for his men,
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of angst against us.
Mm.
Because, even Brian Robbie is a great friend of mine. I love him dearly as well. bloody become very cantankerous at the moment, but he's, and but he's a good man, and of course he claimed that the Selous Scouts were, poaching jumbo and that sort of. And we did have a few guys that were, I don't say they're poaching, but they did shoot. And during the war, they didn't, because we were too busy to go out, looking for jumbo. Ant White was one of them. And Ant, I think used to make ivory ornaments and things, and but I'm bloody sure he didn't poach when he was on the job, as it were. And a lot of my friends actually got licenses, not in the Scouts, but police cars. They used to get, every year they get a license, and they do their thing and store it away.
From the DC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But Brian Robbie is very cross about he won't accept, the explanation I give him.
No.
And it's just one of those.
Winston, what did you make of it when Stannard got involved and the whole bugging of Ron's phone, which led to the end of his command? What do you make of that whole set?
Well, that was very strange too, because Ron phoned me and said, "Winston, my phone's been bugged. Come and see me." So I went down to see him, and he showed me the bits and pieces. And I said, "Well, how do you know it's the bugging device?" I took it up to Red Bricks, where Special Branch was. And we had guys on the top floor who did all the bugging devices, and I took it to them. And I'm trying to think of the guy's name, who was a fantastic guy. And I said, "Listen, is this ours?" Because it was either the police or
military
somebody
intelligence.
else.
Military intelligence.
That's what the guy took it out. And he said, "Winston, that's not ours. I know we wouldn't have used this material. This is either Army or it's somebody else, but it's not us." So knowing that, I went back to Ron and I said, "It's not the police," because I was worried that it was. I said, "It's not Special Branch." Anyway, he called the guy in who was working there, and I'm trying to think his name.
It was Dennis Crocamp.
There was somebody else as well.
And Bert Sachs was involved.
Somebody, I don't know if it was Bert's. All right, it may have been Dennis Crocamp, but it was somebody whose wife worked in the office, was a secretary. And he got in because of her, and he just put the device in. And of course, Ron was acid about it. And funny enough, on that particular day, I went to go and see somebody who was an Army officer, and I can't remember who it was. And I walked into his office, and he said, "Jesus, Winston, there's a big hondo going now." I said, "What's going on?" He said, he told me the story about the bugging. So I phoned Ron, and I said, "Ron, I believe there's been a problem." He said, "Yeah, bloody." So that's when I went to go and see him, and I took the device which they'd found. His electric guys had found it and said, "This is a bugging device." So he gave it to me, and he said, "Find out who it comes from." So I took it to the top floor of the Red Bricks, and I said to the guys up there, I said, "Who?" They said, "It's not ours. It's either the, Internal Affairs or." And so I went back to Ron. I said, "It's not ours." And that was the day Ron was late, because one of the guys told me, he said, "He should have been at this bloody meeting." There was some, who was God, what was his name?
General Hickman.
Hickman, that's right. Hickman was, lording it there. And Ron told me what happened. He said, "I just couldn't stand it. He got there late. He should have been there early. He walked in and he put his briefcase down and he said, 'You guys,' and Hickman was sort of lording it. Everybody was cheering. He said, 'That man has been bugging my phone.'" I would look at his briefcase now because I'm bloody sure he's got something he's taking, So the young subaltern grabbed his case and sort of opened it to see if there was any bugging device in there. Of course, there wasn't.
No,
But
they
that
settled.
caused
I know that. Well, that was what led to Ron's court martial and the end of his
yeah,
military career. But they
yeah, that's right.
settled. They settled that later. Winston, I think you were still around in Cape Town when they got together, and it was established it wasn't General Hickman. He did authorize a bug on, I think, Ant White's phone, but not on
Yeah,
Ron's. That bugging device
Ron.
came from somewhere else, and I think
Yeah.
that leads to maybe MI6 or some foreign intelligence service. I'm not sure we'll ever know the answer to that, but Dan
No.
Stannard was
But
involved.
that's right. It was somebody's wife worked there
Yeah,
in his office. He knew
yeah,
about it.
yeah. But a sad end to a hell of a career, and
It was.
I still get very angry when people bandy about this story about Ron being involved in Ivory. It just makes me very angry, because if you read the transcript of the trial when at
Yeah.
the court martial, the judge president, I think, was a chap by the name of Reed, and he absolutely wiped the floor with the prosecution, and
Really.
he expressed his disbelief that this had ever happened, because there was not one shred of evidence to indicate that there was any involvement in any illicit trade in Ivory. And
I believe that.
Yeah, so that's on the court record, but somehow these stories stick, and it's sullied old Ron's name, and that's always irritated me. But another slightly touchy subject that you might not want to talk about, but there's a book out. It was out a little while ago. This chap Jeffrey Elf, about the Viscounts, and he argues that they were brought down by explosive devices planted in the aircraft before takeoff. I don't know if you've followed any of this.
No,
I read the book, and I was quite persuaded because he's done very thorough research, and it was quite compelling. So I'm just somebody interested in trying to figure out what happened, and I remain as confused as ever about what did transpire in bringing the planes down and after. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
No, of course. I went up to Vic Falls to speak to the guys up there, because I couldn't believe that we'd done it. And then, having spoken to a few people, they said no, there had been it wasn't a drone they sent up, it was something else, and it certainly wasn't done by the people in the sort of aircraft business. It was deterred from the ground. They had
shot down by heat-seeking missiles.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, they found remnants of one that didn't hit the plane. I don't know but I was absolutely sure it wasn't put in the plane. It was just fired from the ground.
Okay.
And they knew the flight path, and there was an aircraft coming out of the airport, and they fired it, and that's well, I would believe that. I mean, I really don't know, but I've spoken to lots of people, and they all accept the fact that it couldn't have been explosives that put it in the plane.
And the people responsible, do you think any of them were ever accounted for?
No, I don't think they were. Ron was going on leave, he'd left now, and he was now going on leave with Jeannie. And I was seeing him off at the airport, and I took my mate with me, or Stanton, and we went into the customs and departure lounge before Ron came through. And when he was ready to get on the plane, they had to go and search him. It was a customary thing. And we were sitting in the rooms, and they said, "Mister, just go in there, and we just want to search you." It's a thing we do all the time. So he went in, and when he opened the curtain, he saw me standing there. He said, "You bastard, what you doing here?" I said, "Run. We just have to do this." And then Stanton arrived with the handcuffs. And he said, "Can you put these on, please?" He said, "I'm putting them on. What about," what was his wife's name again?
Jeannie.
Jenny. "What about Jenny?" "No, there's nothing wrong with Jenny. It's you that we want the handcuffs on." So I said, "Please, just put them on. We don't want to." So he laughed. He said, "Well, I'll put them on." Then we walked him out onto the concourse. And there was that big balcony above the entrance to the airport. He came out, and there was a crowd of people up there. They thought we were taking this Morungu to the plane because he'd done something wrong, and they were shouting, "Viva this, viva that." I said to God, "You see, they know who you are." A bloody traitor. He said, "Come and get this bloody thing over with." I said, "We're not taking them off." So we walked to the plane. We walked them up the gangplank. We spoke to them. The air hostess said, "We're just coming here for about 1 minute. We're from Special Branch." They knew there was a game on. And we took them down the aisle. These somebody said, "God, what's happening?" Somebody said, "He's a gangster." So once we'd set him down, he said, "I'm going to get you, bastard." And, took them off. And it was the first holiday he had for years, And I already got on well with Ron. And, he bought a house right opposite me. A friend of ours, Chris Goff. Do you know Chris Goff? I think.
Yeah.
And Chris Goff wanted to buy this plot of land above me in Simonstown. And when he bought the land, and he saw that there was a bloody generator right in front of the house. It was tucked away in the back. But bloody, he was such a pedantic sort of guy. He said, "I don't want it now." So I said, "Well, Uncle Ron is looking for a house. He liked that place." "Oh," he said, "I'm going to sell it to him." And he did. He sold it to Ron. And Ron built his house right opposite mine, a little bit higher. And that's when he died, unfortunately, much later.
Yeah, I remember that, Winston. I was actually with Chris. You were around then, and when Ron died, I remember his last days. He was somebody I was terribly fond of. But Winston, just talk. I know you had a little bit to do with Ian Smith. Ian Smith and PK van der Bijl. Do you have any recollections of your time with them and the impressions they made on you?
They made big impressions on me, and I loved both of them. In fact, PK was, you couldn't get near to him. It was a few things he would say to you, and like, "Oh, you're supposed to be looking after me," sort of thing. But not in a bad way. It was just a humorous thing. But Smith, I got to know quite well because his daughter came to me in Simonstown and said, "Listen, we're sending Dad to this home."
Yeah, St. James.
Yeah. "And can you just pop in there?" So I said, "No, that's not a problem." So I used to go in to see him, Felicity myself. And she used to cut his nails. And I remember one occasion, she was cutting his nails. And I said to Felicity, because I remember my mother saying this to me, "Throw those fingernails out of the window. Don't let the Zulu boys get them, because it's witchcraft. You see, this is what my grandmother thought." And so when Felicity said to Ian, "Listen, Mr. Smith, what do I do with these nails? Where can I? So I said, oh, throw them out the window. Don't keep them. Throw them out the window. He said, why? So I said, I told him, my mother said, you know, they would take them and make booty out. He said, what? And Felicity already thrown them out. He said, Felicity, he said, what are they going to do now? They're going to pick up my fingernails and make booty out of them. It was a laugh. But he was such a good man. But he was losing it. And I never forget, I went to go and see a man in Cape Town. And he showed me a picture of, I don't know if it was Ian Smith, but it was a picture of an aircraft. And I think it was Ian Smith's aircraft.
It could have been. It could have been.
And yeah, and he told me all about this. It was a picture that they'd been given. So when I went to see Smith again, I said, sir, and his daughter kept on saying, have you seen my dad? Have you seen my dad? So it's to go every week. And I told him, I said, sir, I saw this picture, and it was done by, the pilot was a very famous pilot. Salty Duran, was it Salty Duran?
Oh,
something like that.
Sailor Malone.
Sailor Malone, that's right. I said, I've just seen a picture with Sailor in this house, When you're a little bit better, I'll take you there. He said, oh, God, I remember Sailor Malone. And that was the end of it. So his daughter phoned me about 3 days, and she said, you haven't seen my father. I said, of course I've seen your father. I went there 3 days ago. She said, no, you didn't. He said Sailor Malone came to see him. So he sort of lost the plot of it.
Yeah, that's where. But during the war years, Winston, did you have quite a bit to do with him on his visits?
Sorry?
During the actual war years, did you have quite a bit to do with the Prime Minister on his visits to the operational area and stuff?
I went on a couple of trips with him, yeah. And I'm more with, who was the premier? The little guy, man, with the big moustache.
Clifford
the president.
DuPont. Clifford DuPont.
Yeah, yeah.
He was also quite
Actually,
a character.
I gave him a mug. I made these Mokumbura Surf Club mugs. In fact, I've got the names of the shirt on. And so he came up to the front at Mount Darwin, and it was a gathering of Air Force and Army. And I took up this mug and I said, sir, I'm giving you this mug, Mokumbura Surf Club mug, the first one to have one. He was so pleased. Anyway, many years later, I was studying for some exam to become get promotion or something. A friend of mine was aide-de-camp in Highlands, in that place they lived. And I used to go up and see Donald, the name. Anyway, so we used to drink his brandy, in his room. Of course, he wasn't there. And we used to study together, and I got to know the house a lot, you see. And then on occasion, I would have to take him on a trip, say, and one of the trips I went to was because I was in Bandura a lot of the time. It was the annual sort of fair, for this farmers market type fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been, told you got to look after the president. So I met him, and he said, Winston, he said, I've heard about you. You've been blown up by mine. I said, yeah, what? He said, I want you to tell me. We entered the schoolroom. And he sat on the table, waving his leg. He was a short man. And he said, tell me, what was it like? And what? So I told him, and anyway, now we go into this market thing, this fair, and somebody let out a trap gun, to blast off to chase the birds away from the mealie. And I jumped. He looked at me and said, "Hey, you're supposed to be looking after me. Why are you jumping into my arm?" But he was such a lovely guy. Then we'd go back in the evening, say, "Come on, Mister, you come and have a drink with me." And then he'd get his sort of man to bring in the biltong, and he'd cut the biltong up, and it was just an ordinary bloke, man. It was lovely.
Very humble.
Yeah.
Winston,
Got
just a couple.
You see this? This comes from the present king. He came to visit us in Rhodesia, and he brought his own teacups with him. And when he left, he gave the teacups to the guys in the staff around the president.
Which king was there?
The one that's there now has just become king. What's his name?
Charles.
Prince Charles. Prince Charles came.
At Independence.
Yeah, and so he and my mate got a whole lot of these from him and said, give them to your staff. So he gave me one. So now he's king. I can display it.
Winston, man, thanks for your time. Been great catching up, and I know a lot of what you've told us we wouldn't have heard from anybody else. So very grateful to you.
No, it's been a pleasure, Hannes. I wouldn't have spoken to anybody like I've spoken to you, and of course, I'm getting old myself. Trying to remember is a difficult bloody thing as well. I've just had my brother-in-law from Canada visiting me for a couple of weeks, and we've had a good laugh because both of us again, a bit bonkers. Trying to remember things.
I'm having the same problem, Winston. You're not alone. Jesus, I'm driving my wife bloody dilly. My short term, well, mainly it's things that she tells me to do that I forget. So she just thinks it's me having a laugh, but it's for real.
Matthew's laughing at me as well because he knows what goes on in our household. And I think you must have met Felicity when she worked for your dad.
Yes, I remember Felicity. I do. Yeah. And I remember all the Lundersteads, really. And I'm still in touch with Steve. We do quite a bit together, Steve and I. And I love being... And Steve and I are actually working... he's doing more of the work than I am, but a book on Umtali. And actually, it's called Umtali at War. And and it's Steve, thanks to him more than me. But cheapers, it goes back a long way. The characters, the soldiers, and the people that went through that town, it all adds up. And then obviously the Lundersteads come into it in quite a big way. Catching up on all that.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely, speaking to you, and it's no problem at all. I'm just sorry I couldn't. There's things I can't remember. And it's because I've had these sons like Matthew, drive me crazy.
Well, you obviously didn't slap him hard enough.
No, I think I'll start now.
It's not too late, Winston.
The trouble is he's a head taller than me.
Yeah, I'll see that.
Anyway, thanks, Hannes.
Lovely chatting. Cheers, Matt. Yeah. Cheers, Winston.